Before I came off benzos, I was having panic attacks. I wasn't sleeping. I was anxious most times, during the day, maybe outside of a few hours after I took my benzo, and I was on Valium. And I'd gotten up to about 40 milligrams in the end after 10 years. And, I probably should have seen my doctor then, but I guess it just kind of kept going under my radar, being focused with school and life. Then eventually one night I'd taken my dose, and it was almost as though I had some kind of paradoxical reaction to it. I mean, it sped up my heart. I was laying on the bed for a good hour, heart racing, just feeling like something really bad has gone wrong in my body. Then eventually I called an ambulance and went to the hospital, and they did a bunch of tests, and really scary, laying there thinking like I had done damage. And I remember just sort of talking to God, saying, please get me through this. Please, please let there be no serious damage. I'll turn my life around. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't even know what it meant at the time, but I came home and I should back up. Before I came home, the doctor told me, doing some blood work, you have enough, benzo in your system to tranquilize a small elephant. In fact, he thought I was, seeking for more. He thought that's why I came into the hospital, like I was a drug addict. And so, it scared me, and I went home and I said, I need to get off this stuff. Like, it was a wake-up call. And I cut out 20 milligrams overnight. I just cut off 20 from the 40. Went down to 20. And as you guys can imagine, all hell broke loose. Within a few days, I was completely bedbound, having 4 to 5 panic attacks a day, stopped sleeping for several days, DPDR, akathisia, nerve pain. I got on it for as a muscle relaxer initially. All that had a counter effect. I was locking up. I had cervical dystonia, and that got on fire, essentially. That was just contorting so badly. My hair started falling out. I broke out into rashes. It looked like I rolled in a pit of ants. It was terrible. Metallic taste, ringing in my ears as if I just walked out of a rock concert. All of this craziness, night terrors. Just waking up every hour if I fell asleep from just the most horrific nightmares of being mauled by a grizzly bear or a tornado ripping apart my house and my family dying. It was some kind of like chemical torture. And then finally, when I go back to the doctor and I'm telling him all this, he says, "Oh, no, it couldn't be that. That's your preexisting condition." And I say, no, I'm pretty sure it's not, pretty sure it has a direct correlation with coming off this med. No, all it did was it was masking something. I said, no, before I got on this med, I didn't have all of that. Well, you're anxious, and anxiety grows. Well, how would anxiety keep growing if I'm on the med? Nothing was adding up to this. And then he finally said, well, sometimes the med just stops working. Sometimes we got to replace it with another benzo. And he said, it's like replacing, wine with some bourbon, or, bourbon with tequila. You just switch them out. They're like alcohol, different types. I thought, okay, that's weird. I'd never heard of, tequila not working, so you have to go to bourbon or something like that. But okay, whatever. We'll go with that analogy. So he gives me Xanax and he gives me Seroquel, sends me on my way. So now I'm at home. He says, when you wake up in the morning, just switch over to the Xanax, stop taking the Valium altogether, start up the Seroquel. So I'm at home all night. I can barely sleep. I'm pacing. I'm thinking about this. I don't want to be on 2 new drugs now. Now Seroquel. I just felt like this thing was getting away from me, and it was scaring the hell out of me. And finally, I fell asleep and got a few hours of sleep. I woke up from another nightmare, for my pre-existing condition, as he says, and decided, okay, I'll take his advice. I'll wake up, I'll take the Xanax, no more Valium. Took the Xanax, had another paradoxical reaction, ended up back in the emergency room that morning because my heart sped up again. I ended up, it threw me into a serious panic attack. Serious panic attack. Things were spinning. I thought I was coming out of my skin. Of course, get to the hospital, test, okay, you're fine, so to speak. Go home, get back on the Valium. It's not working. Didn't go up my dose, stayed on the 20. Talk to him again. Oh, no, that's not That doesn't happen. That's impossible. You must have just had a panic attack reaction out of your fear of taking it, which, yeah, sure, I had some fear of switching over, but not really. I mean, I didn't know anything bad would happen. I was more anxious about, having to stay on the med and the switching and the inclusion of the new med, the Seroquel. So this wasn't like some kind of phobia manifestation or anything. And, again, he's angry. Don't get back on the Valium. I said, I'm getting back on the Valium because I can't take the Xanax. He's telling me to come off in 2 or 3 weeks. You can come right off of it. You just need to rip the Band-Aid off. And, it's your pre-existing condition. Really, you'd be better off staying on it. Or did you take the antidepressant? No, I'm not going to take the antidepressant. Well, you're being non-compliant. Okay, all right. And then that's when I found the Ashton manual. And that and a little bit of, a community online that was sort of saying these things that was completely contradictory to what my doctor had been saying, And there was the launch of my, my next 2 years of tapering and benzo hell. I mean, that was my introduction to benzo hell, pretty much. It took months to stabilize. And I remember arguing with the doctor too, as he was telling me it was all pre-existing. And finally, I just kind of slammed my hands down because he wasn't listening. I got a bit aggressive, and I said, pre-existing condition isn't metallic taste in your mouth, sir. And at that point, he stopped, and he actually put his pen down and looked up at me. And I knew I had him, because I was already started my clinical psych program, and I knew there was nothing I had ever studied about anxiety. No person who's never taken a benzo that has anxiety, trauma, depression, none of them have ever reported metallic taste. I mean, that is a very specific benzodiazepine withdrawal symptom. And at that point, he I knew I had him, but I could see the resistance. He still didn't want to give it to me. He still was like, "You bastard," And I realized then too that it's just about them being right. It's just about them having power and not wanting to surrender it over. Maybe they forgot how to be wrong every now and then, and or maybe they see us as some kind of little peon, little peasant in their world. I don't know. I mean, that was my opinion. And I'm certainly not all psychiatrists think that way. I'm not trying to use one brushstroke for everyone, for sure. But you guys know what I'm talking about. There's a certain arrogance, that it's hard to get them to listen, to take you serious. And then at that point, he said, well, even if it is, what are you going to do? You got to get it out of your system, or you got to get back on it and stabilize and stay on it. And he just kind of doubled down on his rhetoric. Never admitted that he was wrong. Nothing that, So I leave again, and the gaslighting, the feeling of not being heard, not being seen, not being taken serious, and not even having a clear path out of there, because he never did any of those things. He never took me serious. He never seemed to hear me or even really fully acknowledge, the version of what happened that I'm presenting. So I leave there and I just feel lost. I feel confused, but I know I have to get off the drug. I'm like, I have to run this experiment. He's angry that I didn't take the Seroquel. Well, I'm not taking it. I'm just, I want to be free of all meds. I want to do it myself. And also I'm in clinical psych now, so I want to give this thing a shot, because if I can't heal myself, if clinical psychology and, holistic psychology can't help mental illnesses, then I don't want to be in that field. I would rather go in a field where I can make more money, that might be an easier job, and potentially less schooling. And, I don't want to be a fake. I don't want to be a fake. I don't want to be someone that's out there trying to use these little meaningless techniques that don't serve anyone. So, the whole thing was just such a crisis of faith that it threw me in. But, the moral of the story is it's not your pre-existing condition. I want to say that because I think some of you guys, you hear me talk a lot about manifestations of benzos, and especially, more so when you're years removed. I think when you're sitting in your house and you're very agoraphobic, I mean, these are the things that I'm looking at. But I had a good conversation with my good friend, Jennifer Swantowski, and she even said, I think sometimes people hear you talking about those things and they think that you're saying that Benzos is, all about these manifestations of, whatever happened or pre-existing. And I say, I never said that. I never say that, guys. It wouldn't be true to my own story for me to say something like that. I said, actually, what I'm saying is much more maniacal. I'm not downplaying benzos. I'm upplaying them. I'm saying benzos are so severe that it's not just merely a receptor damage and the chemical withdrawal. I'm saying that this has a ripple effect that creates much worse conditions in themselves. Not just that, but you would develop insomnia, you develop trauma, you develop agoraphobia, DPDR, all of these symptoms, if they keep going, which are precise manifestations or precise symptoms of withdrawal, if they are left to keep going in their own path for long enough, they get cemented into the nervous system. So it's not like opiate withdrawal where you go, oh man, I'm sick to my stomach, and you're I feel awful, and you're laying in bed and you're sweating out the opiates, and after a couple of weeks, you kind of go back to your baseline. But imagine if you didn't. Imagine if that's whatever, all those symptoms just sort of cemented and kept persisting long after. I said, all I'm doing is trying to kind of provide a little more of a rationale of what those things are. And simply saying agoraphobia is receptor damage, that's not accurate. And calling it a chemical imbalance, that's not accurate either. Hell, some of you clients in here listening to this right now have probably had your cortisol and GABA and different tests done. I know, because I've had many clients that had very extensive testing done, and they were shocked to come back and say, doctor says this isn't that low. I said, all that really tells you is that this was a bigger piece of damage than they understand. That actually makes you kind of understand why they don't fully comprehend what's happening, right? But now we know that it's bigger than chemical withdrawal. If we look at things like, there's so many new studies, and these studies have been coming for at least a decade, but they're really picking up speed now, where you see studies now coming out suggesting that, with SSRIs, it's not a chemical imbalance so much. Now, sure, some people, it is a chemical, and you put the chemical in there, but what's actually happening is the chemicals regrowing. The inclusion of SSRIs is actually regrowing new synapses and new, parts of the brain that process serotonin, more or less, right? So it's not about a depletion of it, because they were doing studies and showing that people that were depressed, there was many of them that still had normal levels of serotonin. So they couldn't completely say, oh, they're not getting enough serotonin. Yes, they were. There was more going on. And what they found was the SSRI was having almost the same effect as ketamine infusion or psilocybin, which, again, was sort of like a miracle grow for the brain. It was causing neurogenesis, right? So hear me, guys, if you're, a fan of these videos, for one, just for what it's worth on my end, I'm telling you right now, benzo withdrawal is not is not as simple as it's your pre-existing condition. And it's not as simple as, oh, well, after you were, tapering, you developed all these other conditions. No. Benzo as a chemical problem at the base is always on the table. What I've always said is benzos is not just the base. It's not just a chemical. It's a seven-headed beast, right? And each one of those heads symptomatically is a profound withdrawal. I mean, think about that it's not just a chemical problem, but it's a chemical problem that induces several other profound mental disorders at once.